Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we're going to do another revisit. This is the second in the line of revisiting games from the past and taking a look at how I feel now. Now, the first one was Hitler's Reich, which was quite a many-year gap. This is a little bit different in that this hasn't been too long since I first got it. It's been probably around slightly less than 2 years. This is Dune Imperium, and we're going to revisit it again today. And we're going to revisit it in light of some upgrades and updates that I have done. This includes the Rise of Onyx expansion. It also includes the Rise of the Immortality expansion, and it includes the special upgrade that was offered for a limited time by Dire Wolf, which upgrades many of the components, and those you'll see during the course of the revisit. So the key is I'm throwing it all together. I'm throwing it all on the table. Matter of fact, it's still behind me back there because I played it a couple times since I did the actual video of it. But let's just get into it. What do I think now as opposed to then? Okay, let's revisit what comes in Dune Imperium, designed by Paul Dennen and released by Legendary and Dire Wolf. First off, we have the original box, which is nice and thick, as if they'd already anticipated that certain things additionally were going to fit into it. You have your pizza box-sized manuals, which are unwieldy, clumsy, but boy, they show off great art on the front page. But yeah, trying to play this on a smaller table and flopping around, it's larger than a windshield. But the information is fairly well organized. The one difference you'll note is that there is a board space guide to go over each and every space on the board that we're going to see. Also, they split up the rules for solo and two-player game. My original review kind of docked it a little bit because I didn't like the fact that they had to go, here's all the common things for both sides, and then the two-player and the one-player. It's still very segmented. Not a fan. That said, the information's there for you to use so that you too can put it in the oven for 20 minutes until golden brown. The first expansion, Dune Rise of Ix, provides some extra details. You get some extra tracks, which we'll go over because we're doing this as a combined effort. This is a huge, big pile of extras that go on top of it. And so there you go. Lots of changes and reworks for different elements of the game. If you play with this one, you're going to have to revisit that a bit, but not too much. And finally, oh look, an actually reasonably sized manual. This is a smaller box, and so it has extra stuff. This is the second expansion that was released in short order. It covers some of the extra, even more extra tiles and more extra cards and more extra ways to score extra points and even more additions and changes to the solo rules. None of which are outlandish, actually, but that's getting into my review. All right, let's look at the board. It's a lot more flight simulator 747 looking, cockpit looking thing that you might imagine, but it's actually not that bad at all. What you have here is the solo play, and what you get is you get the original base board, which if you play the original at all, this is going to look pretty familiar to you, just this particular area here. Note that I have purchased the miniatures upgrade pack, which adds a lot of extra nice minis. Army units are actually not little wooden cubes. Nice touches, really nice touches. You also get the standard set of cards, and this is a large deck now, and so you're going to be finding quite a bit of variety in the game. Same situation. These are the costs for the cards. These are the benefits you gain. These are the standard cards that are always available to you. In the Ix expansion, you get an overlay. You'll see here it overlays the original board, which means that there are certain elements here that are now available that weren't available before. In other words, they cut the boring parts out, and you'll get extra pieces to lay up here to go up and down the shipping track, which is actually thematically more sensible. Also, tech negotiations. This is a total side quest per se, but some of these are pretty darn powerful. And so you'll have an opportunity to expend some of your cards and put your workers down here to be able to buy via Spice some very interesting cards. This is, for example, one of my favorites. putting cards on your deck instead of in a game where the actual churn of your deck is not nearly as substantial as a lot of pure deck builders. That's a pretty potent ability to have, all of which is varying cost, varying degrees, etc. You get new conflict cards, so there's a lot more variety there. And again, those are the two main big changes of the Ix expansion, is that you get those. And of course, there's the dreadnoughts, which will come into play as well. These are sort of super-powered units. Instead of troops, they're dreadnoughts. They all fall under the category of units, but you'll be able to use those in combat. And the beautiful part is that they don't go back to your supply. They are there, and they are a constant menace and threat to others as you battle in the battle area. Then we get into the Immortality Expansion, which expands it even farther with a couple important changes. This easily a house rule that everyone should have had anyway, but this is probably the most favorite of my, I'm getting into my review again, favorite tokens. This token is added in. What it says is once a game, throw those out and put those back in. It was a great idea in Turn in Taxes, and it's a great idea here, so that you can churn through the cards more specifically to work to find cards that more fit your strategy, because you'll need one. Immortality has this special board. These are the seedy sort of underbelly, scientists of the galaxy, of the Dune universe, the Ben Tleilax. And you will be able to use cards. This modifies your starter deck as well, to be able to use cards with an entirely different set of currency, where you convert your infantry units into actual green things, which green things are a resource. So not only do you have your normal, I can pay with money, or whatever you call them, the blue prestige, I can actually use a different form of currency to be able to purchase. The heck is that? That's not right. There we go. What the heck? Anyway, you'll be able to purchase using this green currency these cards, and they have a special grafting that you can do where you can use two cards in one. All of that is it's almost it's sort of like you do the main mission in a video game and then you've got a bunch of side quests. This is kind of one of the primary side quests that you can take advantage of, which opens up the game even more for especially at large player counts. And finally, we have the app, and the app has grown tremendously into a very valuable resource for me, particularly at lower player counts, because if you're playing one player, you're going to have two AI factions called rivals. If you're playing two player, you're going to have a single spoiler rival faction. The rules do vary between solo and two players, how things pan out. And the app takes advantage of that. This app is running on one of the cheapest, crappiest, most worthless Chromebooks you'll ever buy. I think I got it for $79.99 at Target because I was using it I was literally using it to test one of the games I was working on the worst possible technology, and it's the app is a little sluggish, but honestly, it works surprisingly well. So let's get into actual play and see if it matches up with my expectations. Okay, I'm going to continue with my new way of not necessarily showing you the game from the start, because sometimes you get into a turn, I'm not here to do a full gameplay review. There's plenty of those out there. Mostly it's just to give you a sample of the gameplay now and have you decide, is this something I want to take advantage of? We are now in turn 4, round 4. What happens in the game, and we'll go over a little bit, is this is a worker placement mixed with a little bit of deck building, and combining those two elements is how you find some really juicy decisions and choices. That's really the essence of the game. Some people have compared it to, say, Lost Ruins of Arnak. It is not. It's actually a little bit more inclined to underwater cities, and that still remains true even with the additional expansions. What you're doing on your turn is you're trying to get to be the first person to get to 10 victory points at the end of the round. In order to do that, there are a variety of different ways that you can accomplish that. You gain influence with the 4 different houses as they and as you make your way up the track. These victory points are going to be given to you. You could theoretically gain or lose some as you make your way up the track and maybe lose. Not very common, but that's one way to do it. Other way to do it is to win in combat. These conflicts, there are 10 conflicts, 10 rounds, 10 conflicts that will occur on those rounds, and some of those will actually grant you victory points. You'll see there, victory point. I don't want to spoil it. That's another way. You'll also notice that there are certain places in the map, like especially with the new Immortality, you can gain 2 victory points just by following your way up the bug track, the beetle track. They got the little Beetlejuice icons now, so if you get a Beetlejuice opportunity, you just take it, and it basically gives you victory points. That's some of the ways that you can obtain victory points. There's quite a few. There's also, of course, this. So you get enough money, you can buy this card, and you can. And when you buy the card, you get a victory point. So tons and tons of way to do it. In fact, I think the expansions actually open up the opportunity to find different ways to score victory points and such. Let's just get into it. So on a turn. Oh, trash and replace the 3rd and 4th cards in the row. Well, I love that. This is one thing the app does too. It actually says trash these cards and replace them. Because the deck is so much larger with the expansion pack, this has become a very important aspect. I highly recommend it. To keep the talent happy, to get that market churning so that you're not stagnant with options that really, like, you have too much money and these are low cards, you have not enough money and these are high cards, etc. All right, blah blah. Now we do it again. So, on your turn, we have Glossu the Beast Raban. That's who I'm playing against. The AI rules have you collect resources not because they use them, but because they can trade them in for victory points as a result of their actions. Whatever. So what can you do? On your turn, if you're playing solo, whoever's first turn, and I'm the first, I've got the first turn marker. Again, this is the sweet, sweet additional piece that comes in the upgrade pack that was offered a while back. You get to choose what to do with one of your workers. You start off with 2 workers. There's an opportunity to take an action here, the Swordmaster action. It costs $8, but then it gives you a 3rd Swordmaster. Think Agricola. You start off with 2, but you really probably at some point want that 3rd worker. It's literally a 3rd choice, and it just makes your turns that much more potent if you can go around the map farther. On your turn, you take one of your units. You pick a corresponding card that you want to do something with. Now, here's the thing. There's all around the board, you're going to find every single spot you can place it has some benefit, a cost and a benefit. Here, it doesn't cost anything, and you get 1 water. Water is precious. It is precious to me. As LaCroix lives on in the universe. Or you can pay a water, and then you get an opportunity. What is this? Well, it lets you add units to your garrison, which can then go out into the battlefield. With this X, it means not only do you add the 2 units, you can then you put those units in the battlefield, and you can always add 2 more units into the battlefield. Why would you do that? Because you want to win the conflict. Each time we flip over at the round start, you flip over a card and decide, okay, whoever wins this conflict is going to be able to go up 1 in all 4 of these factions, which is pretty potent. Some of the rewards are nominally like, yeah, I could do with 2nd place. This is pretty potent. This might be one to actually go after, because you're literally getting yourself closer to really specific victory points opportunities. So that's where you go. So here you got that. Secrets, that's a way to kind of, I think that one's a little more like just keep people from grabbing intrigue cards, because intrigue cards are these special, like, haha, I got you kind of things, where they could be for combat, they could be not for combat. Like, you get one of these and you can use them. They're just kind of interrupt, and there's a ton of different varieties of them, like interrupting your normal just standard play and providing you with opportunities to sort of mess with the world in one-off ways. Selective breeding. That's a way to call. For those of you who play a lot of deck builders, calling a deck is saying, you know what, this card is so less valuable. If I get this card, it's probably not worth much. There's so many better cards. So you can call cards out, because again, that's important, although you really don't have a lot of churn on your card. You're not going to, you play Dominion, you're going to be churning, 8, 9, 10 times through the deck. That's not going to be a way it works with this game. Fold space. This is where you can grab a card of full space. Why is fold space? Why is that important? Who cares about this card that you use once and get rid of? Well, because you have to be, well, we'll get into that shortly. Highliner, this is big. Like, if you can afford the 6 spice, and that ain't easy, you get to basically roll all your troops in to the battle area, deploy them in the reserve or in the battle area, and you get 2 water. So what are you going to do? And then wealth is pretty simple. Take 2 coins. This one costs 4, but it gives you 5 money. It gives you units to garrison. It gives you an intrigue card. Good stuff, Maynard. The High Council, and these are interesting things. If you get on the High Council, you're going to get an instant $2 every single time every single turn around, which is good because that means that you're going to be able to buy more potent stuff. You'll notice the cost on here vary dramatically: 4, 1, 4, 5, up to 9. Then you've got the Mentat. This is sort of a one-off. You can use it during your turn. If you pay the price, you can actually do an extra action on your turn. And then, of course, the Swordmaster, once again, you can use. The shipping becomes more interesting with the Rise of Ix expansion. Rather than being sort of a rote, trade in some money for spice, etc., you go up on the shipping track. When you choose these, and this one requires that you already have 2 influence in the highliner area, so you can't just start off and use it right away. You got to go 1, 2 spaces up in the influence, which I've done here. I'm blue. And so I could use that if you want. But this says, hey, just grab a coin and move your ship up. Why would you move your ship up? Because when you move your ship up, you have an opportunity on a turn when you use a ship action to go backwards to get whatever the reward is. And this is a crescendoing reward system. So say I move up to here, and then I take this action again, or another card gives me that action. I can choose to go all the way back and go, okay, reset. It means I get every reward at that level and every reward before it. So if I go all the way up here, and then I roll back, I'm going to get all of these reward opportunities. But if I'm up here and I'm like, man, I could use the money now, I don't necessarily need the troops. Yeah, I'm going to roll back so that I can get that 5 money to get that thing. So very interesting sort of sub-game. And why does that matter? Well, because sometimes you need stuff. Then we have this track, and this track is very interesting because these are the bonuses that you're going to get, the one-off bonuses, and you can choose to place your character on these, one of your workers on here. One will give you a Dreadnought. The Dreadnought, again, is cool. The Dreadnought doesn't go away like units do. When you have a Dreadnought, it either stays in the battle, or if it wins the battle, it gets to go off and control one of these spaces, which means anybody using that space, you're going to get a bonus too. Yeah. And then the tech negotiations. They were short. Gets to basically go in and buy one of these using spice, or you have this opportunity to say, hey, I can't afford anything right now, but I'm going to go ahead and put a negotiator here that happens to have a gun. And then when it is time to buy, well, that costs me 2 less. So that's a pretty interesting thing to do. And then we have the main board here, and a lot of these are pretty simple, like, hey, accrue resources. So the sandworms are generating spice. Some of these cost more, like here, you got to pay 2 water, but you can get some spice, and that spice flows, baby. Or here, less, costs less, but gives you less. Same thing, costs less, costs nothing, but gives you something. And so those matter. And all of these have, again, like prerequisites. Like if you have to have 2 influence with the Freeman in order to be able to use this, but it'll give you a troop and some water. This is also part of the Immortality, where it's the research track. That research icon is the only way that you advance on this research icon. We'll get into that in a second. Carthag gives you standard stuff. Doesn't cost you anything. Get a cube, get an intrigue card, and you get to put troops on the battlefield. Same with Arcane. So all of these are valuable spaces contextually. So this track really gets interesting because you have to have, when you get that research bonus, you move your track. You can move it any way you want, up and down, and you basically get the rewards. So it's kind of cool. It's simple enough that it's not very taxing on the brain, but go over here, your Beetlejuice, you get to move your Beetlejuice track forward, or you could trash a card and basically take one of your units and make it into a green currency. Once you get here, this is pretty potent. It means any card you buy from this particular reservoir of available cards gets on the top of the deck, which means it's going to be in play much faster, etc., etc. And again, moving these 2 tracks independently, move forward 2 victory points, that's pretty huge if you follow that track and go along. And the grafting thing is, I'm not going to explain that in too detail, but basically you can use grafting cards with other cards. You graft 2 cards together. It makes the opportunities much more profound and not necessarily as predictable, but more profound. So all right, so I've kind of explained to you all the little pieces. Now let's explain what the heck to do and why we're doing what we do. So on your turn, you're going to take a unit and you're going to decide what to do with it. You're going to take one of these cards and pair it with one of these units. And then now how do you know where to go? Well, this is why it's important to look here. These are the places you can deploy an agent, okay? All of these map to places on the board. So blue, yellow, green, And so these are sort of your standard fare. Then you get into these diplomacy, and these are the one icons that let you deploy over here. And so these cards are important not just for what they can give you, but also for what they can allow you to do to find a corresponding place on the board where they can maximize their most potential. For example, here we have experimentation. Now this isn't going to do much of itself per se. It lets you go up on the track a bit, on the research track, but it can also let you pick any of these spaces to accrue resources. Right now I'm doing well on resources. It's turn 4, I've done okay for myself, but it's time to spend. What I really want to do is I want to get on the High Council so that I get that 2 bonus. So I need to find a card that has a green, oh perfect, signet ring. So I put my, it's best to think of these cards as a magic carpet. And then you got to make the sound. And then discard it. That's all right. So you got to make the sound. You just gotta. It's just important to the motif. All right. So we've landed here, which means on this space we have to pay 5 coins, which these are 5s, not. And we now get to place right here. We're now on the High Council. That means every single turn we get 2 free dollars. So we got to use that space because of the card, but we also get to use the card when this part of the card, not the bottom part, but the top part, we get to use that as well. So there's a double bonus. You use what's on the card, and you use what's on the space that the card allows you to go to. Signet ring is custom. It means whatever your character is, and I've picked Archduke Armand, you get to do his special ability. Ooh, I can acquire a card that costs 3 or less. Look at that. My options are limited. I have 2 cards, but look, we've already got grafting. All right. If I use this card with another grafting card, then I get special icons for where to place stuff. I'm going to do the infantry, though. It doesn't give me anything while I'm placing, but when it's time to go into the reveal, which is sort of the combat phase, I'm going to get a special boost in my combat strength as long as I have a unit out there. So that's it. That is an entire turn. I have done my first turn. That's it. First turn of the round. Then I go to my opponent. Now, for the purposes of the AI, I'm going to go over here, use the handy dandy thing, draw, and it says place on Conspire. I take my unit, I put it on Conspire. It's going to block that for me, and then I gain, so I'm going to gain reputation up here, which is going to get them closer, and I'm going to recruit 2 of their units. So I put these units here. Now notice, because I don't have the X in that spot, I don't get to put them directly into battle. They just go into the garrison. That's what makes these special X spots, X marks the spots, better, because they give you the flexibility to decide, do I want to go into the combat, or do these just go to the garrison? I did have a dreadnought, but it won the last battle, which means it got deployed to a region for the turn, where it's going to be basically hoping that someone uses this action so that this AI can get a spice for free off of it. When that turn is over, it's going to go right back into the garrison and be used. So, pretty potent. All right, then we go to Mr. Yellow. This is Glossu the Beast. What is he going to do? He's going to do Hardy Warriors. Not Laurel Warriors, Hardy Warriors. So, and again, AIs ignore everything here. They just do whatever the card says. So he gains yellow, so he's closer to a victory point. He recruits 2 and deploys them to the conflict. That's potent. That means he's now in the running. He's ahead. And these workers are worth 2 in battle, and then the icons that you get along the way are worth 1, instead of dreadnoughts are worth 3. Maybe even 4 if you've got a special ability. And then deploy up to 2 more troops from the garrison to the conflict. So we're looking at some interesting. So someone who's going to battle for that very important top spot knows now that they're going to have to pace these 4 guys. So, and that's it. We're going to play this, and then I have my second unit. They have their second workers. Eventually, during the course of the game, we'll all have 3 workers going on. So that's basically what you're going to do. You're going to find spots, you're going to take advantage of things, you're going to add, ooh, that's a good one. And then you're going to continue playing this game around and around, whether it's deploying here, deploying in this area, deploying up there. It's all going to be sort of meshed in, and you're going to be trying really hard for the ultimate purpose of getting to the 10 victory points. Let's do a final kind of show of combat so you can at least see what's going on. Again, not a playthrough, just an example. So definitely take advantage of the 5 or 6 great run-throughs that I've seen on YouTube already that kind of go over this in very 2.5 hour detail. So in combat, let's say for example that I've chosen, let's say I chose diplomacy. Nah, we can't do that. Let's just say I used my experimentation. Again, magic carpet ride. Deploy. Alright. So not only do I get a bunch of spice, I would get 3 spice. I'd get whatever the residual was here that the sandworms puked out. And then I get to deploy units to the battlefield. Yay! Cool. So say there's 2. Alright. Now, I know that's silly. Now, when everything's done, the AIs just simply go, I'm done. I go ahead and do this ahead of the game. You can do whatever. But if they don't have any units in battle, they don't even count. They're just out of the picture. So we're pretty much done with Mr. Red here. However, Yellow, he's done. It's his reveal turn. And all he's going to do is he's going to go churn. Okay, so we'll churn again. Okay, then you draw a combat card from them. Oh man, only 1. So he gets 2, 4, 6, 8 for these units, plus 1 is 9. So he's at 9. He's very much in the running to win. Me, on the other hand, I'm going to do a reveal. The reveal means nothing else matters. All you're doing, it's best, you might even just do this. There you go. All that matters is the bottom part. When you reveal, you're just going to go, okay, what do I buy? Well, no, right now I have 3. 3's not a bunch, but remember, I am on the High Council now, so 2 plus 3 is 5. I can grab this Boundless Ambition, which is pretty potent. It has some special expansion abilities. If it's ever discarded or trashed, it gets to do something cool on its way out. So I've spent that. I also get a Spice. That's pretty cool. And then combat-wise, I add up my combat. Now, I don't have any... Some of the cards have the swords and stuff, but I'm literally at 4, so I'm probably not going to win. We'll find out, though. Now we're going to do the combat, and if you have any intrigue cards that can mess with people, then you can use them now. I don't. I have a card that says if I win combat, I get 3 spice. But if I had other cards that... during combat, I can add 2, deploy up to 2 units from the garrison for the combat. There's lots of little surprises that you can throw in. Unfortunately, I don't have any surprises, and so obviously blue or yellow wins the combat, so yellow goes up 1. Whee! Yellow goes up 1, yellow goes up 1, yellow goes up 1. So yellow has picked up the pace. Then all these units go back to the supply, not to the garrison. Dreadnoughts being the exception. Same here, 4. So they go back to the supply. However, I do get second place, so I get a water and I get 2 coins at least. So I've at least got something out of the combat. And there we go, and that's it. Then at the end of the round, any place that doesn't have a worker on it that generates spice generates more spice. This is literally 5 spice. 5 spice is huge. Like you could buy a very potent card over here with spice. You can do a lot of other things, purchasing things with spice. So nice to know. And then that's it. And then everyone recalls their workers. Back they go. Once they're all recalled, again, I didn't play a full turn, but understand, like, you will recall all your workers. There they go. Everyone's back. And that's it. That's the end of the round. These get discarded. And then you pass the first player marker. So now this AI is going to be the first player marker. And then you start again by drawing a new conflict card. Ooh, look at that. And grabbing 5 new cards. And that's it. That's how you play. You're going to play up until someone gets 10 or more points at the end of the round, or you're going to play through the final conflicts. Once the end of the 10th round happens, then you're going to evaluate winning conditions there. But that's the amalgamated version of Dune Imperium with the Rise of Ix expansion and the Immortality expansion. Now let's talk about what I think of it, having revisited it now after a couple years. Okay, final thoughts on Dune Imperium with the special upgrade pack for the components, with the rise of In Excess, and the Immortality Expansion. As always, we will go over the cons, then the pros, then my final thoughts again. As far as the cons go, I gave the original a 10 out of 10 because it really did set the standard for me of just smooth, streamlined, fun, thematic, exciting gameplay. I really felt like it was just put all the pieces together, and there were a lot of pieces back then. There were a lot of things to think about, and I still think that holds weight. You've got you got your leaders, you've got whatever the cards are in the row, you've got so many places to place things, you've got ramifications of combat and how much you're going to invest in that, you've got intrigue cards that change the game in wild ways, you've got your dual use cards where you send your agents, but your agents have to pair with a card, and then you've got to figure out what's the best, not just what's the best choice to make on the board like a standard worker placement, but where you can mesh that worker placement card with whatever you can get from that card, let alone whether we save that card for the reveal phase, and so many things to think about, and generally speaking, that can be overwhelming and boggling. I felt like in the original, with just the base game, which I will put a link to the review back there for those of you who are interested, I was very punny that day. I felt like it was sweet. It was just beautifully sweet to play that game, with all those things going on, that it was smooth, that it was really just smooth, like a jazz tune, of just playing and playing and feeling like you're making even with all the different things you could do, but keeping your mind focused on the goal, but just all of the elements, everything seemed to work well. The factions all made sense in light of the movies. Again, when I did the original, I went back and read the book. I haven't seen the new movie yet because I'm going to wait until it's done. I never see them. I've been burned so many times by things getting canceled, I just don't. But the books were tremendous. And so I was able to really kind of grasp in and get into the thematic nature of the combat. So that part still remains true. Con-wise, I would say that if you felt like what was in the original was kind of the precipice of the edge of the decision-making choices that you have without kind of feeling overwhelmed, this is not going to help you. This is not going to aid you in that. It's not going to overwhelm you with 10,000 more options, but it is going to give you more ramifications. Now, the trade-off for that is that you're also going to have more opportunities, and those opportunities can sometimes come into play at just the right moment in ways that previously the base game would not give you quite as sweet of a sweet spot of, like, worker placement, getting the bonus card, getting that, feeding off that, getting just the right card, etc. So if you felt like, okay, what we've got here in the base game, I wouldn't want to play anything more complex. These are not the expansions that are probably, you're the only group I would probably say you're probably okay without it. However, if you loved Dune Imperium and you felt like you mastered it or you really enjoyed it every time you played it, and you're like, even if you're just on the edge of like maybe a little bit more complicated, everything, like the miniatures, I don't know if they provide them anymore, but I loved having the miniatures. The metal tokens, whatever. That's so cutesy. But the miniatures and the characters, just so much more life. I just like it. Totally unnecessary. Totally glorious. I'm really, really happy I got those. I'm sure I think Etsy has some component kind of enhancements too. So that's if you're totally into it like me. Let's get into the first expansion, The Rise of Ix. Man, I hate pizza box manuals. Not only do I hate pizza box manuals, I hate it when you have the original game with the pizza box size manual, and you have the expansion with the pizza box manual, and you got to try and remember which of this overlaps that, and which of this doesn't. Like, read the original and then overlap the board. Man, I hate you. But whatever. Some people don't mind it, but you're literally sprawling the stuff. It's just so clumsy and awkward. How stupid. But that said, really good. The rule books themselves, other than I felt like the disjointed nature of the solo and two-player rival rule, kind of rules, that was a little weird. But everything else is like, everything you need to know. The rules themselves are fine. They tell you what you need to know. They give you a little bit of a little insight into each and every piece is described. I had, I didn't need to go find Board Game Geek and find answers to questions. I really didn't. It was all there. So props to them for that. Other than the pizza box format, everything's fine, delicious, glossy, colorful, etc. The expansion itself, it changes things, and before, some of the spots were kind of like cheap outs. Like, oh, I need money, so I'm just going to do this and get some money. You're not quite as, or I have extra spice, so I'm just going to turn it in and, like, do a currency swap. And now I got enough for my extra worker and all that other stuff. The changes that are made to the board that overlay the board, I would not ever play without them. I just wouldn't. I think that they take the most boring parts of the game and make them into something on par with the rest of the interesting spots where you can place things. Yes, it does shift kind of your motivation for what thing, spice versus money versus tears, the tears of the fall of the, water. Um, but that's actually, I find everything, I find it all improved. I would never play the original game without this personally. I just wouldn't. I would feel like I was missing something, and that's the sign of a good expansion. You're like, if I don't play with this, I'm going to miss something really, really valuable and helpful to my play. Not, oh, here's a bunch of extra stuff, but we don't really need it. So that part is good. The sideboard with the different technologies, it's not essential, but I still think it's pretty cool. You have to kind of look for it and go, these are not small, trivial, slight increases to your stats. These are some pretty large game-changing things, and the earlier you get them, the more impactful they're going to be. And so I actually find it, yeah, I wouldn't play without that one either. I think that it's nice to be able to go, I think it helped like balance in, like I've got a valuable thing to use spice for, not just the situational stuff like these cards, these workers in these spots, but man, if I pull that off, that's going to really aid me in this situation, especially based on which directions I want to go. Because you're going to have to find a focus strategy. It probably does not have to be a generalist, find something cool every turn and it doesn't have to mash up. You do need to have some eye on a strategy or approach where you focus on certain specific ways to earn the victory points. Because if you're not careful, you'll forget that it's about earning the victory points, and you'll just go off and go, "This is so cool," like don't forget the goal in the middle of the game. Um, so that part is good. The freighters, not the freighters, the dreadnoughts. Um, they change. They change combat dramatically because you no longer have ephemeral units once you have a dreadnought there, and it's not necessarily required. I have played games where I didn't bother with the dreadnought because the combat situation was not. Again, the beauty of this game is that combat fits as a first-class citizen, but everything else in the game is also a first-class citizen. A lot of those games, you're just like, the combat really is too critical, or else the combat is really just a joke. It's not really combat at all. It's just another point reservoir called combat. Here they play this really well in the balance. You have your combat. Yes, you still bring your units in. Yes, you have garrison. Then you bring them into a combat. You decide how you want to point them. Keep your intrigue cards for that special combat surprise. But the dreadnoughts work together because they, A, are more powerful. You only get two of them. But they keep going. They're the gift that keeps on giving in combat, and so you're going to find your scores are increasing because you're using those. You do have that drawback that if you do win a combat with a dreadnought, they're off for a turn. They take a break, which might benefit you financially, but it's not going to benefit you in the next combat. So if they flip that card and like, man, I wish I could have had that dreadnought back. You get two of them, so you got some choices, but the combat is much, much, much better. And they're adding anything. They're adding more different types of conflict cards, so you're going to get much more variety. That's a win. You're going to add more intrigue cards. That's a win. You're adding more standard cards, and in the deck because it has to fit in with. You've got different things going in with So your deck, you've got a much thicker deck, and so definitely you're going to change the game a little bit as far as, okay, like the negative is that the card variety you're going to have a lot more chance to not find a card you were looking for, but it's offset by the fact that there's still tons of cards and you still have opportunities. So the app, we're already into the pros, I switched by the way, the app is 100% essential. Like, it's absolutely an awesome thing to have. It just cuts down on the housekeeping. It takes care of the maintenance. It adds some extra options for like cycling through the cards, the card deck a little bit more. That's great. I can't remember which. The one thing that I didn't get a ton out of was the cards that let you kind of like with the half a agent on them, where you can like, oh, I can now put a worker where someone else put one. Those were so nominal that if that had been, I mean, it's something like, yeah, we threw that in extra for you, use it if you want kind of thing. It's valuable in spots, but it's not necessarily something I would like drive an entire expansion pack over. So anyway, those are the main things about that expansion. I would absolutely not play without it. Now let's talk about Immortality, which is an entirely different pension. It adds more real estate to the space you're going to need. It adds yet another track, another thing to track, although it does sweetly fit it in where you replace two cards that really were like not very interesting but sometimes interesting with these cards, which give you whatever you got from those two original interesting cards, but give you the opportunity to do research. And research, the multi-layer track is, I actually found it a little trickier to teach that, even though it's really not that hard to figure out. But I think part of it's because you're dealing with all these spaces, then you're dealing with all the new spaces and the new tracks and the tech and all that stuff, and the dreadnoughts and all that, and then you're adding in this extra thing. That might be a little overkill. Could I live without playing that? Yes. I could live without immorality, which, given the background, but I probably wouldn't, because honestly, I almost think in the games that I play that you could set that up and people could ignore it and probably do okay. There's definitely something up there about going like, I get 2 victory points just by getting through that track. But it does mean, A, you have more variety of choices when it's time to pick up like cards. 2, you do have to understand that it does add some complexity with grafting cards together and explaining that to people. That wasn't a bridge too far, but it was definitely enough of a bridge to go like, I don't think I would want to add another expansion that adds, other places at the table to have to consider. Because it's when you look at the original board and how it's set up, then you look at all the expansions, you're like, they definitely blew this out to a point where people who love this game are going to be absolutely excited for these changes. I don't see any bad changes here. You don't have to focus on the Tlalix track, but you're going to be a benefit when you do. You don't have to, the combat, again, it's beefed up a bit. You've got opportunity there, but nothing changes about the core essence of the game. What you're getting is all improvements, all things that seem like they're improvements. The only drawback being you have that large deck of cards, but then they add the one thing that honestly anybody could have done. They could have just said, hey, put this in the first place, which is these once in a game tokens to try to churn through the deck. It kind of points to the fact that was a bit problematic anyway. You want to have, if you have, the bigger the deck, the lower your chances of getting something that you really, really want. So you can cycle the deck, which honestly you can do, as many players as you have is as many players you can do that with. And so, on the other hand, you are going to get a lot of variety in the different games because some stuff's going to come up, some stuff's not. It's up to you to gear your strategy around that. Does it add more time to the game? Slightly. I think slightly more time to the game in some ways. On the other hand, it seems like everything that might add more time also augments it by adding more opportunities to get victory points for the most part. So I would rank, the problem is I really like playing the Immortality, but I wouldn't even consider Dune Imperium without playing the Rise of Ix expansion. I would very heavily lean towards pushing people to go ahead and at least add the Immortality expansion, just so that and generally speaking, I found that when I've done that, like, just, we'll put it here, they find, oh, there's enough interesting things here that I think it adds to the whole sum. And again, like, I loved Dune Imperium. It was 10 out of 10 for me. It did everything right. I went on the band. Again, they got me to read the books, and then when I went back and played it, I'm like, everything is richer for the books, and the books are richer for the game. So my opinion doesn't change. Definitely every single thing that we've added to it has been at least 9 out of 10 or higher. And so I think it's safe to say that Dune Imperium continues to be an absolute gem that I would play over and over again, teach over and over again, with or without the expansions. I think I would be able to pull it off about the same amount of teaching time, just by modifying kind of what I emphasize for first-time players so that they don't get overwhelmed. And then once they, once they get into it, once they kind of feel like, oh, this is really smooth, I really like this. Again, the only drawback being sometimes I feel like I wish there was a way to make the card deck churn faster. Plenty of ways to house rule that, but so far it hasn't been a problem, and it certainly hasn't lowered its rating. So, Dune Imperium with the Rise of Ix expansion, with the Immortality expansion, with the enhanced components and pieces, win, 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 win. So, thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.